evening. What do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
So, for it is a divine desire. Thus, the normal desire for increased good should not be condemned or suppressed. It is divine and can be lifted to divine levels of expression through the spiritual laws of prosperous thinking. How wonderful to use the law of increase rather than the negative law of decrease. Often when people criticize, condemn, and belittle others, they do not realize that through the law of mind action, they are asking for the same things to happen to them. Never waste your time giving yourself or others the thought of decrease. Like bread cast upon the water, what you send out comes back to you multiplied, and it will produce corresponding experiences in your own life. During a steel strike, 2 professional men proved the law of increase. One, a chiropractor, refused to talk hard times or listen to such talk from his patients. Even though his office and much of his practice was located in the strike area, not far from the steel mills, he constantly talked increase, prosperity, and success. One night he attended a monthly meeting of the local Chiropractors Association, and most of the men present described what a tough time they were having in their practice because of the strike. Finally, someone asked him about his practice, and he amazed the group by replying, "My practice has never been better. I refuse to talk of hard times during a steel strike or at any other time. I have found that the power of prosperous thinking can change all that." A lawyer in the strike area also used the law of increase during this same period. His associates in the legal profession were constantly declaring how bad business was and that their practice was off. This man decided that to avoid falling into that limited state of thought, he had better be firm in his thinking. One night in his prayer session, he said, "Lord, I believe that you are my shepherd and that I need not want. I know those steel mills have been my main clients, but I also know that you have many equally prosperous clients who need my legal help. I am trusting you to provide new prosperous clients whom I may serve." At this time, he had 4 big corporation clients who were his largest channels of income. Soon 3 of these corporation clients were giving him more business that brought in additional income. Several other corporation clients provided him with more legal business than the steel mills ever had. Thus, he was richly provided for during a period when most everyone was talking of the law of decrease and getting that result. Invoke the law of increase in simple ways. You can invoke the law of increase in a number of simple ways. You should speak the law of increase about yourself and others boldly and positively. You should look and act out the law of increase. You should write out notes of increase and image and affirm rich increase. It was Nehemiah of the Bible who used the law of increase to get the walls of Jerusalem rebuilt after the Jews returned from Babylonia. Cupbearer to the king of Persia, Nehemiah secured from the king the materials and manpower to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. But he soon discovered that hostile tribes had occupied Jerusalem while the Jews were in exile. It was necessary for Nehemiah to organize 2 crews of workmen, one to build the walls of Jerusalem and one to fight off the enemy tribes. The walls were rebuilt in 52 days after Nehemiah affirmed, "The God of heaven, He will prosper us." Often we have used the law of decrease rather than the law of increase and have only delayed our prosperity. We have been like the children of Israel who remained on the border of the promised land for 40 years when they might have gone forth into the land reportedly flowing with milk and honey. Perhaps Joshua and Caleb are 2 of the most prosperous thinkers of the Bible. Of the 12 messengers whom Moses sent in to inspect the promised land, they were the only 2 who returned with proof of its riches in the form of an enormous bunch of grapes. When the other messengers reported that the land was rich but inhabited by warlike tribes, Joshua and Caleb confidently added the law of increase to the situation by declaring, "Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it." But the majority were against this plan, and the Hebrews remained in the wilderness. Years later, when they finally did go into the promised land, they discovered those warlike tribes were not as big as giants as previously reported, and they discovered that the people of Jericho had been as afraid of them as they had been of the people of Jericho. These people had seen the smoke from their campfires across the Jordan River and had feared there must be hundreds of thousands of them rather than only about 40,000. Thus the Hebrews discovered that the people they feared were afraid of them. Through their hesitation to go in and claim their good, they only had prolonged their stay in the wilderness. Eventually they had to face the situation and master it anyway. The same applies to each of us. If you use the law of decrease and limit your good, you are never satisfied with the limited result. Eventually, you have to begin applying the law of increase anyway. So why not do it in the beginning and get on to your promised land of greater good rather than remaining in the wilderness of want, lack, and privation? Give others thought of increase. You should convey the impression of increase with everything you do, so that all people will receive that rich impression. When writing, telephoning, thinking about, or meeting others, give your family, social acquaintances, business acquaintances, friends, world leaders, all people the thought of increased good. Declare for them, I bless you with a rich increase of God's almighty good. Speak bold words of faith, confidence, and increase to them directly as well. Just a few words can work wonders for another. A retired Army officer recently said to me, You'll never know how much you helped me several years ago when I was feeling low and was actually on the brink of suicide. Your words turned the tide of my thinking and of my life. When I thought back, I realized that the only thing I had said to that man was, You aren't too old to begin life anew. You've been a success in the past, and you can be a success again. Take a new lease on life, because you have what it takes to succeed. Speak words of increased good to others often. You may never know how much it means, but the results will show forth. When speaking of someone, speak in terms of their success only. If you know of someone who has been making a comeback from past mistakes, contribute to his unfolding success by ignoring his past and emphasizing only his present good. Not only will you add to his increased good, but you can be assured the skeletons in your own closet will be rattled less. Give yourself thought of increase. Give yourself an equal thought of increase. You can do it just by feeling that you are becoming more successful and that you are helping others to do so. Your every act, tone, and look should express a quiet, rich assurance of success. Words to convince others of your success are not so necessary when you get the feeling of richness implanted in your mental atmosphere. It is then radiated from you and subconsciously communicated to others. They will want to be associated with you in business transactions and otherwise, for they are subconsciously and consciously benefited by the feeling of richness, success, and prosperity that you radiate. Just by quietly working to get the feeling of richness, success, and prosperity, you will draw to you prosperous-minded people you have never seen before who will become your customers, business associates, and friends. People unconsciously go where there is an atmosphere of increase. It is thus that business expands rapidly, and many rich blessings flow forth. As you give the thought of increase to others and entertain it quietly in the deep recesses of your own mind, others are attracted to you and automatically prosper you. Dare to invoke the law of increase in every way it reveals itself to you, both large and small. A housewife recently spoke of how she helped to pull her husband out of a financial slump by saying to him every day when he returned home from work, "Now tell me, dear, every good thing that happened today." They were both surprised to see how much good came to pass and how much they had to be thankful for. The whole tide of their thinking turned from failure to success. Anything you can say to help yourself or others get the feeling of prosperity is worth the time and effort. Avoid hard times talk. Do not think, talk, or act any way but prosperously. Do not allow others to talk to you in any way but prosperously. Do not read anything or take seriously anything that is printed or said that seems contrary to prosperous thinking. If you mix up your trend of thought, you set up cross currents that neutralize your efforts for prosperity. In order to be permanently prosperous, dare to be different. You should not become upset when people talk hard times. Neither should you join in their sad chorus unless you want to experience hard times yourself. Instead, declare in the face of apparent hard times, divine restoration is taking place. The good which the locusts of lack have eaten is being divinely restored. The divine law of balance and equilibrium is doing its perfect work. The law of divine adjustment and balance is a universal law, and you can help that balancing factor work for good through your prosperous state of mind. This can be a time of rich blessings and great prosperity for you, because, as the salesman declared, there's gold dust in the air. A saleswoman recently pointed out what hard times talk can do. She spoke of a fellow employee who constantly talked lack, recession, hard times. Understandably, this employee was not making her quota of sales. Instead of thinking about prosperity, she was spending her lunch hour roaming about town, talking with other failure-minded people. When she returned to her sales job after lunch each day, she always said the same thing. I've been in stores all over town. Business is terrible. Nobody is selling a thing. The result? Well, the woman to whom she so often said these things refused to accept these ideas of hard times, for she knew the power of prosperous thinking. As she invoked it, her sales remained high and her commission checks appeared regularly. But the woman doing all the hard times talk got an unwanted result. One day the manager of the store called her in and placed her on part-time work, although she wanted to work full-time. You can and do produce tangible results with your attitudes. This lady proved it, but in the wrong direction. Think upon plenty ideas. Charles Fillmore showed us how to use the law of increase when those about us may be using the law of decrease. The spiritual substance from which comes all visible wealth is never depleted. It is right with you all the time and responds to your faith in it and your demands upon it. It is not affected by our ignorant talk of hard times, though we are affected because our thoughts and words govern our demonstration. The unfailing resource is always ready to give. Pour your living words of faith into the omnipresent ethers, and you will be prospered through all the banks in the world close their doors. Turn the great energy of your thinking upon plenty ideas, and you will have plenty regardless of what men about you are saying or doing. A businessman recently said to a banker who was trying to talk hard times to him, "There's plenty of money in the world, there's plenty of wealth, and there are plenty of wealthy resources to be developed and tapped. I refuse to believe in anything but wealth and prosperity for myself, for you, for all mankind." The banker shook his head and said, "You are the most optimistic person I know." He then proceeded to lend this businessman a sizable amount of money, with which this man proved that there is wealth and prosperity for anyone who thinks prosperously and who uses words expecting prosperity. Conserve and rightly use the substance of your being for prosperity by concentrating your thoughts, feelings, relationships, and activities on prosperity, not failure or lack. Expect to become prosperous. Start thinking and speaking in those terms and no other. Remind yourself often that scattered, idle thoughts, words, and expectations bring scattered, idle, poverty-stricken results. Hitch your mental image of prosperity to the rich star of success and keep it there. Overcome discouragement and disappointment. When you are tempted to become discouraged in your efforts towards greater prosperity, remind yourself that to think according to the general beliefs of the human race is easy and useless. But to think prosperously in spite of appearances to the contrary is worth every effort because it produces rich results. One editor has often said to me, "Remember, Catherine, the majority is always wrong." Another way to invoke the law of increase and thus to avoid the pettiness and destructiveness of the law of decrease is by training your mind never to be disappointed. If certain things do not come at certain expected times in the way you wished, do not consider it a failure. Since you have not received that thing, you can instead stand firm in the faith that something much better is on the way and will appear at the right time. When you seem to fail, remind yourself that it is because you have not asked big enough. Expand your viewpoint and expectation, and a larger answer than you originally anticipated will surely come. Failure is nothing but success trying to be born in a bigger way. Most seeming failures are just installments towards victory. Avoid hurry. As you invoke the law of increase, remember that there is no hurry, force, or push on the prosperous plane of life, and there is no lack of opportunity. Do all that you can do in a successful manner every day, but do it as calmly as possible without undue haste, worry, or fear. Go as fast as you can, but do not hurry. The moment you begin to hurry, you cease to be prosperous in your thinking and become fearful, which is the prologue to failure. Whenever you find yourself hurrying along to try to force a result, call a halt. Fix your attention on the mental image of the thing you are working toward, and then begin to give thanks you are receiving it and accomplishing it in God's own wonderful way. A sales lady I know says that when she gets the feeling that she has so much to do, she does nothing. Instead, she goes off for a little while to relax, have a cup of coffee, and regain her equilibrium, after which she can usually accomplish twice as much in half the time. But, you may object, how can I do this when I am living in the midst of people who do not know these laws of prosperous thinking, and who are constantly trying to rush me? When I worked as a secretary in the business world, I knew what it was like to be in such a situation. But I also discovered that one person who uses the power of prosperous thinking has more control of a situation than a whole army of hurried, harried people who scatter their power in futile rushing around. At such times, mentally declare, "Peace, be still," and observe the atmosphere around you calm down to a reasonable pace. Free yourself from petty thinking. Do not waste time holding grudges, even toward those who have treated you unjustly. You will meet such people along the way as you rise towards success. Others who are not making the grade will try to hold you down to their mediocre level, but they can't if you refuse to be bothered by what they say or do. Nobody can keep your success and prosperity from you but yourself. If some people seem to try and even to succeed to dissuade you from time to time, remember that success has endless doors ready to open to you, endless ways and means of providing your good. If one door closes, just know there are bigger and better doors trying to open. Don't get jammed in the half-closed door. Let it close. Be ready for the new doors that wish to open all the way for you. You can also free yourself of petty thinking in regard to others' success and free yourself from their petty thinking by declaring, refusing to criticize another's prosperity, I turn to God, ask His direction, and am prospered. In like manner, others refuse to criticize my prosperity. Instead, they turn to God, ask His direction, and they too are prospered. There is plenty of success and prosperity for all. Never become disappointed, discouraged, or upset by what others say or do in an effort to hold you down or take your good from you, as you begin to rise to the prosperous thinking. In the long run, they cannot hurt you, only themselves. Instead, feel flattered when people try to hold you down or down you in any way. It's a sure sign that at last you are succeeding and that others realize it. At such times, take a deep breath, give thanks that your success is now manifesting, and consider it a compliment that others bother to criticize or try to pull you down. There is doubtless something about you they secretly admire and feel is lacking in themselves. Otherwise, they would not feel the lack keenly enough to resent finding its opposite in you. Make the law of increase your new frontier. All of these methods and attitudes are a part of the prosperity law of increase. As you think vitally about this fascinating law, it will reveal its own ways and means of expression to you further in regard to your own individual circumstances. I suggest you begin invoking the law of increase fully with these ideas. I am now experiencing perfect health, abundant prosperity, and complete and utter happiness. This is true because the world is full of charming people who now lovingly help me in every way. I am now come into an innumerable company of angels. I am now living a delightful, interesting, and satisfying life of the most widely useful kind. Because of my own increased health, wealth, and happiness, I am now able to help others live a delightful, interesting, and satisfying life of the most widely useful kind. My good, our good, is universal. Your good is created as fast as your good words are uttered. Dare to begin invoking the law of increase in the practical ways mentioned herein. As you do, your thoughts, prayers, words, and expectations of increased good shall circle the globe and maybe even reach into outer space. Indeed, you shall become a part of the new frontier for universal good that is now spanning this planet. Prosperous Attitudes, Chapter 8. Recently, a friend sent me a comic postcard which read, "Rich or poor, it's good to have money." I'm sure most of us would agree. All sorts of wonderful things are being written about money, and of our potential for having and enjoying more of it. For instance, it has been predicted that our national economy can be 50% richer by 1970, which surely reflects possibilities for increase in our individual prosperity. It has also been pointed out recently that more fortunes have been made since World War II than in any comparable period. Fortunes are still being made according to the figures of the Internal Revenue Service. One writer recently declared, "You can still make $1 million." Another boldly stated, "Your chances of making $1 million are better than you think." As you study the lives and experiences of prosperous-minded people, you will find that they have a friendly attitude toward money. Whereas you will discover that the more general attitude is that there's something wrong with having money and being prosperous. Some months ago, I was a guest speaker at a club luncheon at which a hospital executive was given a check to aid in furnishing a new wing of his hospital. In response to receiving the check, this executive declared, "It isn't the money that is so important. It is the club members' love and interest in this new hospital wing that really counts." Somehow I wondered if he realized what he was really saying, because my first reaction, which I suspect was the silent reaction of a number of others, was, if the money isn't important, why is this man here? He is a very fine and busy executive, and I wonder if he would have come to lunch with these ladies had they merely sent him word that they were impressed with his hospital expansion program. Surely this man was taught as a child what many of us were erroneously taught, to dislike money. If you listen closely to the conversations of people around you, you will discover that this is a general attitude. People often discount the importance of money in one breath, and yet they admit that they are working very hard to get it in the next. They do not realize the cross-current they are setting up with their thinking, which in turn voids most of their efforts. Through such crossed-up thinking about money, they are working at cross purposes, and often they will experience a crossed-up result. Money is divine. I shall never forget the first time that as a minister I lectured on the importance of money for successful living. When I declared that money is wonderful because it is divine substance, that money is good when rightly used, a lady sitting on the front row gasped and almost fell out of her chair. When I stated, money is divine because money is God's good and expression, she almost passed out. She had come to this lecture because she was interested in having greater prosperity in her life. Yet when I mentioned money as a legitimate form of prosperity, it shocked her completely. After the lecture, one of the members of the church board cornered me and said, "Don't you think you put it a little too strongly about money being good because it is a symbol of divine substance?" And I found myself replying, "I hope I put it strongly. I surely meant to." The board member then said, "Yes, but you shocked that lady on the front row so much that she may never come back." And my reply was, if I shocked her, it was doubtless because she needed to have some old, erroneous ideas about money shocked out of her thinking, as we all do. I then pointed out that my whole purpose in teaching the spiritual and mental principles of prosperity was to help people to learn God's good truth about prosperity being their divine heritage, so that they might be freed from failure, poverty, and all other sins of lack. I realized that sometimes the process was a shock. At the next lecture, that lady was back, sitting in a front seat. The only difference I could detect in her attitude was that she had pulled her chair up a little closer towards the lecture platform, happily awaiting further shocking truths about prosperity. After she attended a number of the lectures, she calmed down considerably in her strong attitudes regarding the pros and cons of prosperity. In due time, she came to see me and confessed that when she first began attending the prosperity lectures, her life and affairs had been in dire shape, financially and otherwise. Her husband had left her, her children seemed to have turned against her, her physician predicted that she was nearing a nervous collapse, she had had a good job but her money never seemed to go very far, and she could not get along with her fellow workers. She was even involved in a lawsuit concerning her previous job. But week by week, as she began to entertain new ideas about prosperity and successful living, her whole attitude changed, as did her way of life. Before long, her husband returned. She gradually was able to establish a more harmonious relationship with her children. She did not have a nervous collapse. The lawsuit regarding her former job was quietly and amicably settled out of court, and she began to find joy and satisfaction in her work. Indeed, before long, she seemed a transformed individual, and it all began the night she dared to change her thinking about money. Most people are sensitive about their capacity to earn money. In most instances, a person's capacity to earn money would increase if his attitudes towards money were positive and friendly. It was the late Mike Todd who has been quoted as saying, "I've never been poor, only broke. Being poor is a frame of mind, but being broke is a temporary situation." Good news about money. Many people seem confused about the correct spiritual attitude toward money, so let's get the record straight. There's nothing wrong with money or in our wanting money. It is a God-given medium of exchange, and there's nothing evil about that. The moment we let go of those false ideas that someone ignorantly taught us years ago, that money is evil, we will find that money circulates in our financial affairs much more easily and more satisfyingly. Appreciating money can prosper you. One lady recently told me that since she had released the vague notion that she was supposed to think of money as evil, she had much more of it to enjoy. She said that previously all her money was gone within 3 days after payday, but that now there seemed enough to share and to spare regularly. Truly, she is one of the most generous people I know. Another lady recently declared, "One of the things I have learned so vividly is to stop saying, 'Oh, it's just money.'" She then went on to say that since she had been appreciating rather than depreciating money, she had gotten a wonderful new job at a much higher rate of pay. She is now enjoying both her new work and her new salary. Perhaps you wonder why it is important to cultivate a sincerely favorable attitude about money in order to attract happier financial situations. Well, money is filled with the intelligence of the universe from which it was created. Money reacts to your attitudes about it. Since it is the law of mind action that you attract whatever you appreciate and repel whatever you depreciate, money responds accordingly. If you think favorably about money, you multiply and increase it in your midst. Whereas if you criticize and condemn it in any form, either your own money or another's, you dissipate and repel it from you. Perhaps you have noticed how this law works in regard to your moods. Notice how much more you are able to purchase for your money when you are in a good mood. But if you shop in haste or while in low spirits, everything seems to go wrong, including the purchasing power of your money. Since your thoughts make your world, your thoughts about money have to be appreciative in order for money to appreciate you and be attracted to you. In talking with hundreds of people about their financial affairs, I have discovered that often when they do not have enough money to meet life's demands, it is because they have been scoffing and condemning money in financial matters, their own or another's. A man once talked with me who was down and out in every way. He was in ill health, out of work, and extremely lonely and unhappy. As he talked, I tried to discover what attitude of mind had brought him into such pathetic circumstances. He told me how hard life had been for him and how difficult people, situations, and events had been along the way. As his conversation progressed, he began talking about the politicians in Washington and the terrible way they were spending the country's money. As gently as I knew how, I then suggested that he try reworking his attitudes toward people in general and toward the Washington politicians in particular if he wished health, prosperity, and happiness to come to him. After giving me a penetrating look which seems doubtful of my sanity, he finally agreed to try the prosperous thinking approach. Months later, when he returned, he had to remind me who he was because his appearance had improved so much. He then radiantly described that previous cold winter afternoon when he had left my study and walked all the way back to his boarding house because of lack of funds for bus fare. By the time he got home, he discovered that in his absorption of some of the ideas we had discussed, all pain had left his body. That night he'd slept peacefully for the first time in months. As he began to use prosperous thinking every day, wonderful things began to happen. He fully regained his health, and soon a new field of work opened to him that he had long wanted to enter. At the boarding house, he met a lady who was also in ill health and financial despair, and he began to pass on to her some ideas about prosperous thinking that had meant much to him. As he did, her whole outlook toward life changed. When they both began to appreciate rather than depreciate, in due time their appreciation involved each other. On his second visit to see me, this man said that he now wished to marry this fine little lady. He soon brought her to see me, and she was as radiant as any bride-to-be half her age. This man then declared that all of his life he had been scoffing at money and financial matters, and at people who had wealth. He realized now how much destruction he had doubtless caused in his own life as a result. This man had learned at last that when we do not have enough money to meet life's demands, it is often because of our depreciation of money, our own or another's. The golden rule of prosperity. People sometimes bring financial hardship upon themselves by declaring that they personally are prosperous and blessed, but then Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so haven't a cent to their name. Such people often triumphantly discuss the difficulties of others at length. If you think of yourself as prosperous, but of others as living in lack, through the laws of action and reaction, you are inviting the same thing to happen to you. The golden rule of prosperous thinking is that you should not think or say anything concerning another's financial affairs that you would not want to experience in your own. An unusual example of this truth was demonstrated in a court case where two partners were dissolving their business. One partner kept declaring that she would get everything, that the court and judge would doubtless favor her completely, and she triumphantly declared that the other partner would be left with nothing. But the other partner was a praying, positive, fair-minded individual who put the matter into higher hands, affirming that the divine law of love, justice, and perfect equity would manifest for the highest good of all concerned in the situation. The accusing partner went so far as to take her lawyer to look over all the property and financial assets that she was convinced the court would give her. She constantly thought of herself as prosperous, but declared that the other partner would be left in utter financial ruin. However, when the judge heard the facts in court, he decided that the accusing partner was entitled to only one small piece of property. He awarded the rest of the financial assets, which included a housing project, a cleaning plant, and several other pieces of real estate, to the partner who had prayed for divine justice. Thus, this woman proved that if you think of yourself as prosperous, but of others as in financial lack, you are unconsciously inviting the same thing to happen to you. How to make money your servant. On the other hand, to envy another's money indicates a belief in lack of sufficient supply for everyone. Remember that you will experience what you most strongly give your attention to. When you hear of another's good fortune, rich inheritance, or wealthy possessions, you should do so with great joy and appreciation. Another's demonstration of riches is but further proof of a loving Father's divine bounty, which is available to all mankind. You should rejoice in its every rich evidence. Money seems so charged with divine intelligence that it seems to tune in on what you say or think about it, and it responds accordingly. A friend has related at various times how the appreciative attitude toward money helped to keep food on her table during the Depression years. Her young son seemed to know how to get the most for their money at the grocery store. When the money supply was low, she would send him grocery shopping with the substance on hand. Regularly, he would come home with much more than anyone else in the family could have purchased for the same amount. Perhaps it was because any amount of money seemed to work overtime for him. Through positive, appreciative attitudes towards money, you can make money your servant, instead of becoming its slave. You should master money rather than be enslaved by it, because you are placed in this universe to achieve mastery and dominion of substance in its every form, as it is pointed out in the first chapter of Genesis. Deliberately cultivate the habit of appreciating money and make no excuses about your appreciation. If you do make excuses and depreciate money, it seems to know it and to be repelled by your depreciation. I shall never forget the first time I made this statement in a lecture. Appreciate money as the rich substance of God and make no excuse for your appreciation of it. For if you do, money will be repelled from you by your foolish excuse-making. A lady carrying a big purse was sitting in the audience. Suddenly her purse flew open and money fell out all over the floor, making a lot of noise. We all had a good laugh while others helped to collect her money. Of course, we passed the experience off as a joke for the sake of this woman's feelings. But later, when I met her personally, I gave some rich statements which to charge her mind, because she seemed to radiate a deep feeling of financial limitation. It was as though her money had heard what she had been saying about it and was trying to get away from her. Charles Fillmore has written, "Watch your thoughts when you are handling your money, because your money is attached through your mind to the one source of all substance and all money. When you think of your money, which is visible, as something directly attached to an invisible source that is giving or withholding according to your thought, you have the key to all riches and the reason for all lack." Perhaps you have heard the story about the careless Scot who tossed a crown, thinking it a penny, into the collection plate. When he saw his mistake, he asked to have it back, but the deacon taking the offering refused. The Scot grunted, "I'll get credit for the crown in heaven." "Nah, nah," replied the deacon, "you'll get credit for the penny." Give up mixed attitudes. Let's give up our mixed attitudes about money, which can only bring mixed results. John D. Rockefeller Jr. once described the wonder and glory of money by saying that man could use money to feed the hungry, cure the diseased, make desert places bloom, and bring beauty into the world. And how right he is. As Solomon once declared, "The rich man's wealth is his strong city. The destruction of the poor is their poverty." Indeed, money is good, and we should have more of it than ever in this rich era we have now entered. An editorial recently pointed out the power of money for world peace, in suggesting that the president of the World Bank be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize because of his excellent work he has done in producing financial peace in several countries. The editorial concluded, "Wouldn't it be timely to recognize that proper use of cash can be a big factor for peace in the world?" Just as you should not turn up your nose at money, neither should you make a god of it. Money is filled with the desire for life, movement, expansion, and activity. It does not like to be grasped, clutched, or restrained in idleness. Indeed, it is the active circulation of money that brings prosperity, whereas depressions and recessions are caused by the miserly hoarding of money. Even as our national economy depends on the active circulation of money, so your individual prosperity depends on the active circulation of money. This does not mean that you should not save money, but you should not abuse money by misuse. Several other attitudes towards money are especially helpful too. For instance, never declare, "I can't afford this," or put on a poor mouth, as we say down south, about things. Such statements sow seeds of poverty and limitation, which will produce after their kind. Instead, it is better to declare that it is not wisdom's way to undertake certain financial matters, or at least it is better to phase your financial no in a more positive and prosperous manner. Affirm often, "I use the positive power of God's rich substance in wisdom, love, and good judgment in all my financial affairs. I am prospered in all my ways." It is also unwise to magnify financial difficulties. If you brag about your financial troubles, and some people actually do so to gain sympathy and attention, then you will always have financial troubles to brag about. A businessman who has achieved independent wealth through his stock market transactions said that early in his stock market ventures he invested heavily and lost heavily. In one transaction alone, he lost $20,000. But never once did he mention his financial losses to anyone, not even to his wife. Instead, they continued to live prosperously, and soon the situation changed so that he was able to compensate in rich gains for the lessons he learned through previous heavy losses. To this day, he has never openly discussed those early losses, and he is now enjoying financial independence. In difficult financial periods, it is good to affirm, "I have faith that this too shall pass," and then continue holding to the high financial vision of success toward which you are working. Another attitude toward money to be aware of is this. When you give money to another person or to an organization, do not give it with the thought of need or obligation. Such thoughts only attract more needs and obligations to be financially met. Instead, give to add to their prosperity. This applies to the money you pass out to your husband, wife, children, employees, club, church, to the grocer, to the banker, and the candlestick maker, as well to the government and everyone else. This attitude makes the giver and the receiver feel richer. Your thinking concerning the receipt of money or other financial supply is also important. The prosperous way is to graciously receive your good in all forms and make no excuse for your acceptance. It is an offense to both the gift and the giver for the recipient to declare, "Oh, you shouldn't have done it." Welcome money and divine supply from all directions if it is being freely given and incurs no sense of obligation. Declare often, "All financial doors are open, all financial channels are free, an endless bounty now comes to me," and then joyously let it come. I know of a woman who desperately prayed for greater prosperity, yet she constantly refused gifts or favors that were lovingly extended to her, thus closing many channels of her prosperity. If you cannot use the gifts that are bestowed upon you, do not say so. Simply accept them for the generous thought they represent, and then pass them gladly along to someone who can use them. The only time this attitude does not apply is when someone is trying to bribe you or buy your friendship with his favors, so that a sense of obligation is being incurred. True generosity has no strings attached. There are no bribes, unspoken favors, or obligations involved in true giving. If you sense such a purpose behind a gift, you should feel free to say no to false generosity. Pray about your financial affairs. Another attitude toward money that needs to be clarified is this: don't be afraid to pray about money or to get specific about your financial affairs. The ancient Hebrews did not hesitate to pray to God for exactly what they wanted. Many of the great leaders of the Bible prayed specifically for prosperity when it was needed. Elijah, for example, prayed persistently for rain to end a 3-year drought so that the Hebrews could again have crops, food, and prosperity. A rich father never intended men to suffer along in this lavish universe, and we are fooling only ourselves if we think that we must live in lack. If you have a financial need, dare to pray about it specifically and ask your loving Father to help you meet that need richly and completely. The promise, "Ask and it shall be given to you," contains no hidden clauses, nor does this promise from the book of Job. If they obey and serve him, they shall spend their days in prosperity and their years in pleasure. We have national days of Thanksgiving, and we say grace daily at our tables to remind ourselves that God is the source of our supply in every form. In regard to prayer for riches, you have probably read the late George Mueller of Bristol, England, who established orphanages for children many years ago through his belief in the prospering power of prayer. He has been described as a man of faith to whom God gave millions. He has also been called a prince of prayer because of his habit of asking God directly for whatever was needed, rather than speaking of his needs to people. Mr. Mueller once said that the great fault of most of us is that we do not ask big enough, and we do not continue in prayer until it comes. He also advised, expect great things of God, and great things you will have. He once told a friend, "I have praised God many times when he sent me 10 cents, and I have praised him when he sent me $60,000. Solely in answers to prayers for prosperity, $7,500,000 was given to him for the building and maintenance of his orphanages. The story has often been related of how Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of the Unity School of Christianity in Lee Summit, Missouri, often prayed concerning Unity's financial affairs in the early years of the movement. One time a payment was overdue on the printing presses, and the sheriff came to repossess the machines. But when Mr. Fillmore suddenly declared, "I have a rich father who is going to take care of this," the sheriff believed him literally and replied, "Well, in that case, we'll give you a little more time." Mr. Fillmore then continued to pray for prosperity, and the money came in. Those printing presses were never repossessed. Later, during the Depression years, the love offerings that came in from all over the world to support Unity School were much less than usual. Again, the founders of Unity prayed specifically, boldly, and deliberately for money, financial supply, and rich prosperity. One day, as the workers on Unity Farm were drilling for water, they struck oil. That oil well proved an adequate answer to their financial needs throughout the Depression. Of course, the unity movement is now worldwide in its scope. In recent years, appraisers have stated that the financial value of Unity Village, which is now incorporated, is so rich that its true value can scarcely be estimated, that it would run into the millions. How to demonstrate money. One of the secret teachings of the occult religions of the past was their knowledge of how to demonstrate money. Those privileged to learn this secret were taught to make a concrete mental picture of the amount they wanted, the denomination of money, and how it looked. After making a picture of a definite amount, they were then taught to hold it distinctly in mind as though it were already visible, and they could mentally see it very plainly. They were then taught to command the rich substance of the universe to give it to them. They were instructed to affirm, "Give me this," and to repeat this demand many times, day after day, until it manifested. Since the mind is all-powerful, you have the same right and privilege of mentally claiming money, financial assets, and rich supply if you wish to use a strictly mental method. Many successful people have either consciously or unconsciously used this method. A powerful statement with which to charge the mind, along with charging it with the mental picture of the specific amount desired, is, all financial doors are open, all financial channels are free, and, then name the specific amount, now comes to me. It is also wise to affirm that it manifests through divine channels in God's own wonderful way. Along with mentally visualizing and mentally claiming specific amounts of money, and along with praying definitely about money, it is also good to speak specific words of riches for yourself and to your possessions. For yourself, declare often, "I give thanks that I am now rich, well, and happy, and that my financial affairs are in divine order. Every day, in every way, I am growing richer and richer." For your wallet, checkbook, or other channels of financial supply, it is well to affirm, "Money, money, money, manifest thyself here and now in rich abundance." Don't be afraid to declare that large sums of money, rich, pleasant financial surprises, and rich, appropriate gifts are manifesting for you. Do not be vague about money unless you want money to be vague in its response to you. A woman on the West Coast who had read some of my ideas about money recently wrote me in appreciation. She said, "I am glad to at last find a minister who isn't afraid to speak plainly of money as a blessing. A minister I know has often spoken to me in terms of plenty to share and to spare, and I found out what this minister meant last Christmas when I received 4 fruitcakes. I had been affirming plenty to share and to spare for Christmas. I had so many fruitcakes to share and to spare that I gave 3 of them away. How nice it would have been to receive something for Christmas besides fruitcakes. That experience taught me to be definite about what I wanted if I expected to get definite and satisfying results. Thinking in definite terms opens the way for definite results. Don't limit your income by decreeing just enough to get by. This is a pauper's prayer. At one period in my life when my financial income was inadequate, I cut these words out of a magazine, pasted them on a card, and placed them on my bedside table where I viewed them daily. Your money starts growing now. Your earnings double. I was astounded when my financial income did start growing immediately through a remarkable series of events that occurred. Within a few months, I suddenly realized my income had doubled. Money adores the prosperous attitude and richly responds to it. Substance, the source of money. Along with an appreciation of money, you should also understand and fully appreciate substance, out of which money and all tangible objects are formed. Times of depression bring out the fact that in days of prosperity, man either forgot the prayers and struggles that brought him to success and apparent safety, or else he failed to build his fortune on a firm financial foundation. If he had thought more about the source of life and substance, he would have escaped the needless grind of poverty he has endured right in the midst of abundance. The scientists say that substance is that which stands under and supports every visible and tangible object. If you do not have money and it does not seem to manifest as you think prosperously about it, then perhaps the divine equivalent of money wishes to come to you. As you appreciate the substance and know it is everywhere, universally present and in ethers about you, as you realize that it is passive and waits to be formed and brought into visibility by your thoughts and words, you will realize that you have control of the invisible world of rich substance and rich supply, as well as the visible world of riches. It was Einstein who first stirred up the scientific world when he claimed that substance and matter, which includes money and all visible objects, are convertible. He declared that the formed and unformed world are made out of the same energy, ether or substance. He said that the visible and invisible realms are relative, convertible, and interchangeable. From a financial standpoint, we can use his theory of relativity. If the formed and unformed worlds are relative, then what have you to worry about if your finances get low? You can use the law of relativity to produce either money or its financial equivalent to meet your needs. If substance hasn't manifested as money, don't get panicky. Instead, declare that divine substance is the one and only reality in this situation. Divine substance does not fail to manifest in rich appropriate form here and now. The scientists declare that substance is filled with life and the ability to take visible form. As you affirm that substance is doing whatever best in the situation, you release its universal intelligence and its ability to take visible form. Your financial good may come forth to you in completely unforeseen ways, perhaps from halfway around the world or through strangers you have never met. But it will come when you give it your attention and free it to work in its own wise way. If the usual channels of supply have not opened, then invite unusual channels of supply to open by recognizing that divine substance stands under every visible form of supply with endless ways in which to manifest its riches for you. Substance is friendly to you and wishes to supply you richly. Give it your attention and appreciation. Place your faith in it, though it seems invisible, and then let it prove its power to prosper and care for you. Never underestimate the power of substance as the one and only reality which never fails. It will then manifest as money or in the most appropriate financial form, perhaps through people you've never seen. As you invoke the various prosperous attitudes about money and substance contained in this chapter, confidently do so with these words of Emerson ringing in your financial ear. Man was born to be rich, or inevitably to grow rich, through use of his faculties. And then get ready for rich results. As those rich results appear, perhaps you would like to be reminded of this truth a young man in the armed forces recently wrote his mother. Yesterday is a canceled check. Tomorrow is a promissory note. Today is the only cash you have. Spend it wisely. Whether in terms of time or money, it still applies, doesn't it? Work, a mighty channel for prosperity. Chapter 9. Perhaps you wonder why this chapter on work did not come earlier in the book, since work is considered a mighty channel for prosperity. The answer becomes more apparent when we look about us and realize that the world is filled with people who are working hard to become more prosperous every day, yet many of them are not becoming prosperous at all. Why? Often because they are not thinking about prosperity and success along with working at it. Their attitude is not right. For all the hard work they do that should produce prosperity, they neutralize it by their failure talk, by their association with failure-minded people, and perhaps by their criticism and condemnation of others who are moving up the ladder of success. They have not realized that there must be an inworking of prosperous ideas before there can be an outworking of prosperous results. Thus, the preceding chapters were necessary to condition attitudes for the rich good, the expanding prosperity, and the enduring satisfaction that should be yours in the process of work. Attitudes can make the difference. Once a secretary was working vigorously to attain prosperity. She was heavily in debt and had been fired from several jobs and was in dire need of steady employment. She was adequately educated since she held 2 college degrees along with business school training. At first glance, she seemed easy enough to work with, but as others became better acquainted with her, they realized that she secretly held grudges against the whole world and all her past employers in particular. It became apparent that she constantly sought sympathy for her hopeless financial affairs. When it was suggested that a change of emphasis from failure to prosperous thinking might be the answer, she became furious. She wanted to keep her prejudices, grudges, and failure attitudes, which filled the atmosphere around her with such heavy pessimism that people were repelled by her. With her mind so cluttered with hostility, it is little wonder her work was unsatisfactory, her inefficiency at an all-time high, and that she disliked her various jobs and employers. Conversely, another working lady seemed to realize that the prosperous, victorious attitude paves the way for satisfying, productive work. To all appearances, this lady had no reason to feel victorious or positive. She was past the half-century mark. Many people in her age group would say that they were getting too old, which alone was reason enough for their lack and unhappiness. Furthermore, she was a widow and very much alone in the world, having no children or other close relatives. But she did not use this as an excuse for failure. Instead, she was a very happy and successful person. Even more challenging, her sales product was one that most of us would not care to attempt selling. She sold cemetery burial lots. Yet she sold them in large numbers and seemed very happy about her product. She also seemed to convey her enthusiasm to those who purchased them, though most of us would like to put off thinking of this particular item as long as possible. The result was that she enjoyed most of life's comforts, a lovely, comfortable, spacious home in which she often entertained her host of friends. Financial securities such as rental properties, stocks, bonds, and other investments, as well as a high, steady income from her sales work. She had time for social, church, and cultural activities, as well as for vacations and travel. To her, work was divine, even though she sold the last product in the world most of us wanted to buy. Work is divine. The word work means different things to people. In the dictionary, I found a half page of definitions. A prosperous thinker might think of work as divine or sublime, or as the creative activity of good in some satisfying form which is balanced with play, rest, and harmonious surroundings. Khalil Gibran has written that work is love made visible. Perhaps you do not agree that work is divine, sublime, or even a satisfying inner expression of your talents and abilities. The work you are doing at the moment may not seem divine. If not, there is a reason, and that reason is good. But let us go back of the result to the cause. William James once stated that 90% of us are using only 10% of our mind power. Psychologists believe that every human being a dynamo of concentrated creative energy which is ever seeking new avenues of expression. The desire for prosperity and for beneficial self-expression in work is but a part of that creative energy trying to express in our lives. When the right avenues are found for the constructive outlet of that creative energy and the right attitudes are established, man is happy, well-adjusted, and considers his work divine. But when right avenues of expression have not been found and the right attitudes are not established, that same creative energy is restricted to expressing in mediocre ways. Then man is unhappy and considers work a curse instead of the divine blessing it is intended to be. Many people find themselves in work that they consider unpleasant, while they are still near the bottom of the ladder of success. It is their attitude and reaction to their work at this point which determines whether they remain at the bottom and go on cursing their work, or whether they go on up the success ladder step by step. Dissatisfaction can be good because it often prods one to aim higher and then do whatever is necessary to get there. Your present circumstances are for a purpose. Let us face the issue squarely. You may discover that you are where you are now for the purpose of redeeming certain character traits or certain attitudes of mind which have impeded your progress in the past. If you are in uncongenial work, realize that you are there for a purpose, which may be to develop divine qualities that will eventually add to your general progress and advance you further up the ladder of success. After entering the ministry, I realized that every job, big and little, that I had held along the way was a part of my training for the lecture platform, for the counseling room, and for my writing ministry. Your immediate need is therefore to discipline your attitudes and actions so as to glean the good from your present experiences and pass beyond them to higher phases of self-expression in satisfying work as soon as possible. In other words, when the pressure of desiring more good is upon you, when dissatisfaction with your present way of life assails you, or when the pressure of financial strain disturbs you, it is then